turn off my music now. Don't need that playing in the background. All right, we'll just give it a minute here to let some people flow in. Obviously, and then we'll get started. We'll probably give it like maybe 2 minutes or so, 2 or 3 minutes. Let me turn my phone off. But yeah, man, it's good to have you on the show. Thanks for reaching out.
Hey, yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, we'll just kind of chit chat here, and then we'll officially get started. But one thing I kind of wanted to ask you, what made you want to do like these like videos, right? Because you did this for like Banjo-Kazooie, you did the video for StarCraft 2, like Age of Empire. Like what kind of started all this?
Sure. So back when I was in high school and college, I used to play like a ton of computer games. And when I graduated, like I still played computer games, but I found that like something had changed almost, and I felt like over time I was growing less interested in playing computer games, and eventually got to the point where I wasn't playing them at all. And I started to think like, well, maybe this is just something that happens when you grow up, and like maybe computer games are just for children, and I've outgrown them. And then I played Dark Souls 2, and I played it. I'm like, wow, this game is like so good, and it's just like the games that I used to play, and like maybe it's not me that changed. Maybe it's just that I don't like modern game design, and so I thought that I would start a channel that like where I would try to learn more about what game design is, and like maybe try to like target maybe an older audience of people who like me like really love computer games, but maybe don't play computer games anymore, or like don't understand what has changed in the industry, or like things like that. And so I created a channel where I would like explain computer game design. And so since I did that around 3 years ago, I've just been writing and talking about like the games that I play, which nowadays is almost all RTS games.
Right. So just for the record, how old are you then?
I'm 26.
Okay, so you're a year older than I am. So we have like a similar time period of gaming, then.
Right.
But I it's funny that you say that, because I kind of felt like the same thing, and I don't know like at what point you kind of fell out of gaming, because it was the same for me. There just wasn't like a whole lot of games I was interested like in playing anymore, and I feel like everything was just kind of like a rehashed version of like something else, and it's like nothing. This doesn't speak to me, right? It didn't draw me in. Nothing made me want to like give it a chance, and so like I just was like focusing on work, and it had actually like started like even like so it happened like with StarCraft 2. It was more like an issue of like needing to focus on work, right, and having to like stop playing games because it wasn't a priority. But like I just remember like one day it was like I had stopped playing like someplace after after HOTS had come out, like maybe like halfway through HOTS, and Legacy of the Void had come out, and I hadn't picked it up. And I just remember one day like I just really really wanted to play a ladder game of StarCraft 2, right? And that's like that's what started everything off again. Like I just like discovered my love for the game, and like I started doing like my show and stuff, and like I haven't looked back since.
Right. Yeah, like for me, it's like I think it was at some point. I think I was moving or something, or I was like rearranging my apartment, and I looked and I was like, man, I bought like 60 or 70 Xbox 360 games. Like I can't believe it. And I was always someone who only bought like a game like I was really sure that I would really like it, and I would like research it. And like for the Nintendo 64, I think I bought like 10 games total, and I loved every single one of them.
Yeah.
I bet
half of them were rare games.
Exactly.
Great developer.
And I was flipping through my Xbox games, and I'm like, these are all like okay, I guess, but something about them, like there's no one game here where there's like, yeah, this is Banjo-Kazooie, or this is Mario 64. Like this is a game that I really love.
Do you think some of that too is just because like when like the consoles came out, right, and you were so young and you were very impressionable about those games, and because back then, and I can't speak for you, but obviously like with my parents, it was like pretty rare for us to get like a new game, and if we got a new game, it was like one that we had you know, got it like in the garage sale or like whatever. Like, I mean, I remember playing like Nintendo 64, you know, up until like, you know, we were getting like almost done with like the PS2 before we got like our PS2.
Right.
So, but I think it's because, you know, I don't know, it's like what we had, but like you found like new and interesting ways to like make those games fun sometimes, right? Like, because
Yes.
it was back in the time where it's like, well, there's no, you know, DLC and, you know, there's no, you know, bonus pack or whatever. Like, you bought the whole game and you still love to play it, but like, you know, it was like, there's got to be other stuff to do, right? Like with like Banjo, right? Like it's a collector. It's like, well, you know, I beat the game, but I didn't collect everything. I'm going to try to collect everything. You know, there was still like much more to do.
Yeah, I remember me and my brother, like, this is when the internet was just like getting started out, and we would look for, I think what we searched for was like bugs and glitches in GoldenEye. And I think like there was like on like IGN maybe or a GameSpot, and we would like try to recreate them in the game. We got so many hours of fun out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. If only we had known about like speed running, right? Like if only we had like had that figured out. Oh my! I can't even imagine how much more fun I would have had with like Donkey Kong 64, you know, or like Legend of Zelda. You know.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's not until we're way older do we realize like, wow, this game really was like really broken.
Yeah.
So, but no, I found it interesting. You know, obviously that you say that, but yeah. So go ahead and continue. So you had. You know, you'd bought all the games for the Xbox, and you realized, you know, you had a ton of them.
Yeah, and so like I had a ton of them, and so I realized that like something about gaming had not hooked me anymore. And what I realized when I played Dark Souls 2, and then subsequently when I played StarCraft 2, is that the same thing had kind of started to happen to me when I played Age of Empires. Is that like I loved Age of Empires 2, and then Age of Mythology, like something changed and I couldn't put my finger on it, but like it was a little bit less fun. And then Age of Empires 3 was like also just like a little bit less fun. And like at the time I didn't have the vocabulary or the understanding to kind of express what I was experiencing, but what I was experiencing was that like these companies were trying to make these games appeal to so many people that they just really ended up appealing to nobody. And without that focus, I had lost interest.
Right. So what was that one, like, what is that like key factor for you that like drives you to like love these games? Like, what is it, like the difficulty aspect of it? Like, what is it in particular that draws you into games like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, I think it's like just the depth, like, of a creator. Like, this is what I like about Dark Souls and StarCraft in particular, is that it feels like the creator had something very specific that they were trying to accomplish, and just like experiencing that vision, and like just like it gives you kind of like a different perspective maybe on like in Dark Souls. This is perspective of like, well, if you don't have clarity, if you don't have like the soul, then like you're still alive, but you're not really alive. You're like undead. You're like hollow, and that kind of like makes you think. And then it's surrounded by a game that's also awesome, and so that makes it more fun.
Right. No, that's interesting. And then what do you think it is about like StarCraft 2 that kind of drew you in, or like even like Age of Empire, like when it comes to like these RTS style games?
I think it's just like a healthy outlet for competition. And I just like building stuff too. I like building armies and placing down production buildings, and in Age of Empires in particular, I really liked city building.
Yeah, that was one thing in your videos that you had kind of said you had stated, it's like a labor of love, right? Like, because you're like each game you're like making something new, right? Like you're building a new base, you're doing new builds, you're creating, right? And
Exactly.
What immediately came to my mind was almost like playing with like Legos as a kid, right? Or even like Minecraft, like if you want to even update it, you're right. But it's like that's what it is, right? Like you could have built nothing with Legos, right? You could have just built like a brick, but you're like, this is the coolest brick because I built it, right? Like when you're a kid, it doesn't matter what it looks like, it's just because like you did it yourself. It's like look what I was able to make on my own without anyone's help.
Right,
right?
right. It's like this creation that belongs to you.
Yeah, exactly. And you look at Minecraft, and obviously people are able to do crazy stuff in that. But even in StarCraft, it's like the same things. And it's just in a different way. It's like instead of like look at this crazy like thing that I built in Minecraft, it's like look at this crazy build that I did in StarCraft 2, and it was super powerful, right? Like you're still
Yeah.
you're still like creating something.
Yeah, like for me, like there's a certain opening in TVP that I think like probably won't be viable after the new design patch, where you open like 6 Marines and a Widow Mine, and Beyond is very famous for opening this way. And I feel like no matter how many times you open 6 Marines and a Widow Mine, like you do the same exact build over and over and over, it's always like a little bit different. Like you learn something, or like you do something cool, or like your opponent does something cool. Like it's never like exactly the same thing. It's like always something new.
Right, right. It's everyone approaches every situationally different, and I think that's one of the best things about StarCraft 2, right? Is because like yeah, it might be TvP, but just because it's TvP doesn't mean it's going to play out the same. Like you play it one way, I play it another way. This person plays it differently. This person plays it differently. Everyone has their own variation on how they play the game.
Right.
So I agree. I think that is pretty cool that we everyone can play it. Basically, you can literally have your own style, right? Like you can literally like it can be similar, but it's your own. You know what I mean? Like you can literally do what it is that you want to do.
Yeah, I think Artosis and Tasteless were talking about this in a cast once, where like even at the highest levels of StarCraft, even at that level where so many things are not viable anymore, every player still has kind of like their own fingerprint. Like you can kind of tell who's playing just by watching if you cover up the names.
Yeah, I actually thought that would be an interesting idea for a tournament. Would it be to do like a double blind? So invite people. Don't tell them who's being invited. Give them all fresh accounts to play on the day of. That way, no one's prepared for anything. No one knows who they're playing. All they know is race. And then we'd see if we couldn't guess who is who, just based on
Cool.
on how they played.
That would be really cool. I actually wonder whether people could correctly identify the region that people are from, like EU or NA or Korea.
I mean, obviously, like it would have to be played, like on a neutral server, I guess. Somehow, like you'd have to like come up with something. That way, that wasn't necessarily given away.
Right.
I don't know exactly how you'd do that, but I mean, even if you knew the entire roster of who was coming, you wouldn't know who you were playing. So it would still be super hard. It's not like you could prepare for anyone. And then, yeah, you'd still be playing like a barcode account that doesn't have any games on it, so you wouldn't know who it was. So,
oh, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, it'd be kind of an interesting thing. I wonder if it would be viable. Be kind of a cool idea if Blizzard tried to do something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I mean, like I said, like we were talking about before, just to get us back on track, just with like what attracts us to like these games and stuff. That's this healthy outlet, for competition, and I think that's why like we like StarCraft. But the great thing about it is it's so many people play it, and the competitive aspect isn't even the majority. It's the casual aspect of it. Whether it be co-op or custom games or arcade, that sees the bulk of the use.
Yeah, I think the lead co-op designer in an interview with Loco, I believe it was last year, said that Blizzard sees about 80% of their players play StarCraft 2, play the campaign, and then never touch the competitive multiplayer entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that the co-op program was like an attempt to bridge the gap between players who play the campaign but don't want to play the competitive multiplayer, but may still be interested in playing the game on a casual level.
Right. Yeah, kind of like, yeah, more, I guess I would say like a competitive casual level, right? Because you can still kind of compete like when it comes to like co-op, right? Like you're still like, competing in a sense. You're still trying to win. It's not like the campaign. It's, a little bit more difficult than obviously like you have, your co-op partner, and then you have your skills and you're trying to like level up and stuff. So there's a little bit more to it, but obviously it worked. It's fantastic. Obviously like everyone loves it. The commanders were, probably the best thing that's happened to this game. I think it brought new life back into the game. I think it brought a lot of new people in, and I think it brought a lot of people back.
Yeah, I totally agree. They've said that more people play co-op now than people on the ranked ladder, and like I don't know how much overlap there is there, how many like people only play co-op and how many people only play the ranked ladder, but it's been like tremendously successful. I'm sure they'll include something like it the next time they make an RTS game.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't see how they couldn't, and I think they'll just keep building on it. You know, obviously, like we see it now with the skins and stuff, and you know we're headed toward those microtransactions. I mean, it probably isn't too long until we start seeing these commanders with their own skins available, right? Like in the co-op mode, you'll be able to get the skins for your commanders. I could see that happening.
That would be cool. Like sometimes I wish that I was more into co-op, so I had like at least a personal anecdotal example of like what would bring more people in and what would be a good way of monetizing it. Like
Yeah.
I'd be interested in hearing from people who play a lot of co-op, like what would you be willing to spend money on, like what would you like to see.
Yeah, yeah, definitely would be interesting. Unfortunately, I don't play a lot myself, but it is fun. I have obviously done it before. I just don't. I don't even play a lot of ladder right now. I don't have a lot of extra time, unfortunately, to be playing. But every now and again, I sneak on and I'm able to do a couple ladder games here and there just to keep my skills. But yeah, obviously, you come from Age of Empire background, and you actually played Age of Empire competitively, correct?
That's right. I played competitively in Age of Mythology and won some tournaments there. And then Age of Empires 3, I participated in the World Cyber Games in 2007 and 2008.
Gotcha. What was that experience like? Like being able to come together in like a large tournament format like that, and meeting other people that play the game competitively, like in person. Like, how did you feel like about that?
Honestly, like I look back and see it as a really important. It's kind of interesting how when you experience something as a kid and how you look at it as an adult are different things. But like when I look back on it now, I see it as like a really important part of my growth as a person, and like I learned a lot from it, and like it was just a great experience. And I'm so glad I did it. When I was a kid participating in tournaments, I was just like, it was just nerve wracking, man. Like I would go home from school and practice, and like that was really fun. And then I would just sit and be like, oh God, I hope this guy's not practicing too much. Oh man, I wonder how much that guy's practicing.
Yeah.
And so like I remember as a kid, it like felt really overwhelming, but it was a really good experience in retrospect.
Yeah, it's cool, and it's cool that you're it seems like obviously because you did it, your parents were at least not totally against the idea of you traveling and competing and stuff.
Yeah, they were pretty cool about it.
Cool. So obviously you did this design video, and you kind of go over you kind of break it down into like blocks, right? Like you chose to break it into like core chunks of how the game is designed, right? Like whether it comes to like the I forget what it was, lock and step, right? Like what is that? That's the
network architecture,
right? That's like the network architecture, and then you broke it down into like game sense and like game theory, kind of, right? Like what were the specific blocks? I guess I can't recall at the top of my head.
Yeah, so like the way that I approach like making a video is I try to ask like a question that I don't know the answer to, and then I try to come up with like a detailed and researched explanation of an answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
So the question that my series tried to answer is like, what is StarCraft 2?
Right.
And so like it's kind of hard. Like when I ask myself that question, it's like I don't really know because it's like an experiential medium, and so I tried to break down like what is the experience they're trying to get, and then how do they convey that experience. And so I started with like build orders, and then replays, and then economy design, and then art style, and then like just tried to like answer this question of like what are they trying to do here, and how are they trying to do it.
Right. And kind of what did you, I don't know, for those that haven't watched that series, and I'm going to recommend that anyone watch that. And as I told you before we started, I'm going to recommend anyone, getting into the game takes a peek at that, because I think it'll kind of help them figure out, exactly, when people say, hey, I haven't bought this game yet, is it worth it? I think this is really one of the videos that we should be introducing them to them right away. Be like, watch this video. Like, this is like a very good explanation of like what this game is and how you should look at it.
Thanks.
But yeah, what did you kind of find out? Like, I kind of want to like go into your discovery. Like, so what did you kind of, overall, discover about StarCraft 2 and the architecture, and like, how was it meant, to be experienced?
So when you look at the interviews that they gave during the development process, like their vision for the game was they wanted to produce a game that harkens back to the legacy of StarCraft 1 and Brood War, but that simultaneously creates something new that like where people can get a new experience and like brings new people kind of into the franchise. So like I think like splitting is like a really good example of kind of like the brilliance of the design of StarCraft 2 is that like I think at some point in development they came to the conclusion that they could not build a game with Brood War style pathing and get like millions of sales because it was 2010.
Right. Like that's not going to cut it these days.
Yeah. And so I think they were like, well, how can we have like this great pathing engine, but then like still have that high skill ceiling? And like, to me, splitting is like this really brilliant idea of like, oh, what if the units, like the fact that they path so well is like a bug almost. Like they path really well, but they path as this giant ball. And like if you have two banelings run into them, you can kill 40 Marines or something. And then you have to use that pathing and it ends up looking really cool when you spectate someone who splits well. Like I think that's like a really brilliant way where they're like, well, let's have this esports aspect of what we had before, but then let's try to make it so that people in 2010 or 2007 or whenever they were developing it still like it.
Right. And I don't know overall, how do you feel like they did in their attempt to do that?
I think it's the most successful RTS game ever made. Like it's just like it's crazy that there are still 300,000 people playing it 7 years after release.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, if you look at the numbers, like if you compare it to other games like Global Offensive, I think that game sold like 30 million copies. And when you look at the database of competitive players, I believe they have like 2.9 million ranked players, which is about like 10% of the player base. Mm-hmm. And then if you look at StarCraft 2, like Wings of Liberty sold 4.5 million copies. Presumably Legacy sold less than that, like maybe let's say 3 million copies. With 300,000 active ladder players, that means that StarCraft 2 has like you could argue with like imperfect data that it has a similar attachment rate to Counter-Strike. But like in RTS, that's unheard of. Like people like in Brood War, like 2 years after Brood War came out, nobody was playing it anymore. And so like it's just tremendous how they managed to do this and keep this audience around for so long.
Right. Well, and especially with StarCraft 2 and even now, right? Like we kind of got to a point here at the end of Legacy of the Void where it's like, okay, like it almost feels like things are coming to a close. What else can we introduce to keep it alive, right? And they're doing that now with the new balance team and really doing like big overhauls for like balance, as well as like doing skins, the co-op mode like we talked about just a little bit ago. And so they're really keeping the game alive, right? Like I think we're at a higher player base now than at when Legacy first came out.
Is that true? Wow.
I don't quote me on that, but I believe that I did see. I want to say that I saw that on like one of the Blizzard posts. Just like with like they were basically like trying to go over like the successfulness of like of the co-op and everything, and like of everything that they've been doing. But go ahead if you had something to say.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, I could believe it. Like, the numbers, unfortunately, that Blizzard releases only account for the ranked ladder.
Right.
So, like, the HOTS ranked ladder at its peak had like 420 or 450,000 people on it, whereas Legacy, I think, has never cracked like 320,000. But they don't release numbers for co-op, so if they it's hard to compare, I guess.
Right. But like we just said, that doesn't take into account like how many people are playing co-op, Right. Which we know is more than playing that are playing ladder, right?
Right.
So you're at least doubling that. So that's what 600,000 active players.
Well, we don't know how much overlap there is, right?
Right. True, but let's just with imperfect data, right? We could you could assume, because I would assume it's actually much more than our active laddering, because I feel like there are a few obviously that do like to play both, but I feel like it's a pretty like a pretty big separation, right? the people that have play it for the competitive nature than the people that play it for like the casual nature. And then even then we're not even taking into account the ones that are playing for like arcade still, right? Because like when Legacy first came out, like the arcade, while the search functions don't work very well, for some really great games made in arcade.
Right. Yeah, the arcade is kind of funky because like I don't know if it's just me and my computer or my friends' computers, but like even like just loading images sometimes takes like 10 or 15 seconds. And I like the fact that it's as popular as it is kind of blows my mind because at least for me personally, I find it very hard to use.
It definitely can be. I think for the most part, people know what they're looking for, right? So it's not like super difficult for them to get around when you know what you're looking for. But
right.
I forgot. Oh, I was talking about balance. So in one of the videos, you had stated you were talking about balance, and you were kind of saying like one of the things you felt like they had failed, right, was being able to. I think you said something about like not doing enough balance changes, right, and it made the game feel kind of stagnant. Does that ring a bell? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I remember like there's like this experiential versus theoretical aspect of balancing where like theoretically you should balance very rarely in an RTS game because if assuming your game is balanced around a high skill ceiling, it takes a really long time for people to reach that ceiling. But like experientially, it's like, do you want players to deal with a year of Terran versus Zerg in the late game where they're just every day they're like, oh, I can't deal with this, I can't deal with Ultralisks, this sucks, and it's like you should say like, well, you should try getting better at the game, but the reality is experientially people will say, or I could quit this game and play something else. And so you got to find a balance there between the right thing to do as a designer and the right thing to do just as someone who manages a product.
Right. Well, I think with this new dev team, since it's not been under David Kim himself, but the general dev team has taken over. I think we've seen these broader changes, and they've been happening a little more frequently. But I feel like that's actually to the advantage of the game and the longevity of the game, because it forces us to relearn things, but it also keeps things fresh, right? Where it's like, okay, well, this is overpowered, but it'll change. Okay, now and the meta and the strategies are constantly changing at this point, right? At where it seems between like 2 and 3 times a year almost, where we're having these big changes where the metas are changing massively, right? And while frustrating for the players, I think that's great for the viewership, of the game, because it's more fun to like watch players like figure out new tactics and stuff, and then to change it up, right? I think one of the issues, obviously, that Brood War had, at one point in time was the stagnance of just like the build orders, right? Where it's like, well, if you want to win, you need to do this strategy specifically because nothing else will work, right? Until one day someone figures out like, actually, if you do this on this map, you can win. You know what I mean? But it took a very long time for them to kind of get to that point.
Yeah, like this is something I've thought about a lot, and like I still don't know what the right answer is. Like part of me wants to say that like, well, it's a very complex game, and you should let people like figure it. Like you should let it be stable, and you should let people figure things out. And like look at Brood War and look how that progressed as a game. But then another part of me is like, well, like. Anyone who remembers real-time strategy games like that, you remember going online. It's like, oh, you want to play competitively? You would like go into general chat, and there were so few people playing. You'd be like, hey, is there anyone who wants to play with me? Like, is anybody online? You'd be on MSN Messenger, and like, there's something about those games where like, yes, I agree with the way that things were done, but somehow it just didn't retain, like, people just didn't stick with them, and like somehow I feel like keeping things fresh and changing things regularly maybe is not theoretically good for the game, but maybe in practice it's what people like. And so I don't know, I'm still undecided there, but like I don't know, the StarCraft 2 team has done such a good job retaining its player base that I like, if they want to keep things fresh, I'm happy to see how it goes.
Right. Well, I think it helps keep those of us that have become very invested in the game. Obviously with it ever changing, it gives us, like myself, more to talk about. When these different things happen, like obviously, like it creates these mismatches that were not there, and I think it also helps to generate better storylines,
right,
farther down the line. So overall, I think at this point, it seems like it is the right move. If we want to keep our active player base, because if I feel like if it gets stagnant, it gets boring, right? Like if you're playing the same game over and over, kind of like we were talking about, and if it doesn't have like those extras, it's like, well, what am I still playing this for?
Right, right.
There's
And like,
the other things that I could play PUBG. That's competitive. I could be playing that instead, but
yeah, it's hard. I think Pokebunny wrote a post on Team Liquid talking about this, where he said like that kind of approach works for Dota 2, and like here are some reasons why it wouldn't work for StarCraft. And like I kind of wish that I played more Dota 2, so I had a better idea of what he was talking about with respect to that game. But yeah, for me, I'm still like kind of undecided. I'm still not sure.
Yeah, I'm
happy.
Yeah,
I'm happy to stick with whatever the team is doing now.
Yeah, I got BM'd out of playing Dota 2. So I was like, okay, well, this player base is super toxic. I'm just not going to play this game.
I gotcha.
So that's another thing too. I feel like, and I guess I don't know specifically when it comes to in game. Obviously, since StarCraft is not like necessarily a team based game, it's traditionally played as a 1v1, although there is co-op and and 2v2s and 3v3s and 4v4s. But it isn't like the same thing where you're like on a team right away with 5 other people that are BMing you because you don't know what you're doing, right? Like if you go on Reddit and you're like, hey, I'm a new player, I want to play Protoss, like who can give me some help? I feel like the most part, our community, especially now, maybe it wasn't once before, but now is very helpful when it comes to that and like helping people and like being like a supportive community. And I think that also helps too, is when you have a community that is supportive, it helps with longevity.
I do, yeah. And like this is actually something that made me, I think it's one of the reasons that I end up sticking with the game for so long, is because I started playing the game at the launch of Legacy, and shortly after Legacy launched, the whole thing with Life happened. And I didn't really know anything about Pro League. Like I watched Pro League because I lived in Asia, and so the time zone was convenient. But I didn't really know who he was or like what he had accomplished, or like even just the concept of match fixing was kind of foreign to me. And I remember there was a video, and I want to say it was like Jack Attack and Neuro, or I'm not sure who it was, but it was like, I think it was Jack Attack and one other person. And they were just kind of like sitting down and they're like, okay, this is who Life is. And like, this is what happened. And, we're really sad about what happened too. And like, here's some ideas on like how we should respond to this as a community. And I was like, man, this is really cool. Like the community figures like coming together and just having like a reasonable adult conversation about things going on. Like this is a cool community that I would like to be a part of. And like that, I don't remember exactly what that video was, but it made a big impact on me.
Yeah, we're lucky that we have, such great people, in it that are willing to, invest their time into doing videos like that, like Neuro, and Jack Attack, investing into the community as well, right? Because some players, they don't, right? Like they're just here to stream, they interact with their stream and their chat, but I would say that overall they're not they're not in the community, you know what I mean? Like
right.
they're not on the forums, like they don't say anything, like they just play the game and they have people watch them and they enjoy it, and those people enjoy watching that person. That's pretty much the extent of it. But it's cool that we're willing to like take that extra step, And one thing that kind of even comes to mind is like recently In Control actually made a video, right, about like the NFL protesting right now. I don't know if you're aware of what's going on with that right now. Have you heard anything on that?
Yeah, I follow that pretty closely.
Okay, so like he made like a video about that, and while it is not relevant to StarCraft 2, he's like, hey, like I have this outreach, and I feel like enough people are seeing this, and I feel like I need to throw my 2 cents in because I feel like it's getting so convoluted. People are forgetting what the real issue is, right? So I thought it was kind of cool. Like he took the time to like make that video for like his community and somewhat the StarCraft community as well, right? Because obviously, like he's a StarCraft 2 figure, but just to kind of throw his 2 cents about there to kind of say, this is how I feel about it, and this is why, right? And this is why this is important, and this is why we should care, even if you don't like football and you don't like whatever, like that's not the point, the point is way bigger. So we won't really get into that because that's getting political, but. It just kind of what it reminded me of.
Right. Yeah, I think we're just very lucky with a lot of the community members who have stuck around with StarCraft 2, and like I think the StarCraft 2 community as a whole is really solid. I think that's one of like the really good points about this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, that's kind of like for the longevity of it. Speaking of that though, like with like obviously you were really big into like the AoE games. How was like the AoE community and how to like where was their like focus? I guess because I guess you could say like the focus of like the community is basically on Reddit, and then also like on I would say like the Discord and like the forums. Like I think it was kind of split between that. But like where is like the AoE? Like how does that like what's the structure of that community like?
I'm not really sure what it's like nowadays.
Right.
Like, I'm
No.
not as
No.
closely involved.
When you were when you were in it in its prime.
Oh, I see. Like it was mostly just the forums. Like I remember Heaven Games was really popular in Age 2, and then there was like there was different popular websites for Age of Mythology and Age of Empires 3, but it was mostly just forums. And like Age of Empires had the same problem as like other RTS games minus Warcraft 3 is that like I would just sit on MSN Messenger and be like, "Oh, hey, I wonder what time it is in Germany. I wonder if these people are awake and still playing."
Right.
And then you'd like do a lot of strategic theory crafting there.
Right. I feel like that's a cool thing about RTS games as well is it's really easy to like make friends, right, and be able to do theory crafting with people because people are always interested in like getting better or like finding practice partners. I mean that's kind of one of the things you'd said too. You found it very interesting that people would join a team specifically for the fact that they wanted to find people to play with.
Yeah, like because in Age, like a lot of the top players, we would play like a lot of 3v3 and 4v4. Maybe that was a function of like the fact that 1v1 was so unbalanced and not as much fun. But like I felt like a lot of the people who played Age just wanted to play like kind of what you described, like casual competitive. And I felt like that's what 3v3 and 4v4 were. Whereas in StarCraft 2, like it amazes me that people, rather than doing that, like they're like, yeah, I want to join a team so that I can find a practice partner and get like into GM and get really good at 1v1. And that's just like, that's really different from what I'm used to.
Right. Well, and Blizzard even tried, right? Like they ran like the 2v2 tournaments and stuff, and then even introducing like Archon mode, which even then it really still didn't come on. People were more interested in just playing, 1v1s. And I think that's just because I don't know, it just got sold on, it is like the hardest, 1 versus 1. It's the ultimate test of your skills versus someone else's skills.
Right.
Like when it boils down to it, it's like the hardest to, to grasp and it's the hardest to learn and has a high skill ceiling, like that's what it all boiled down to, and that's what it, gained that reputation as.
Yeah, it's been a learning experience for me because like I personally have still prefer to play team games and like I always love to play team games with people that I know and stuff. And then it's like it just takes a lot of getting used to of like, oh, most people actually just want to play one-on-one or just want to play one-on-one practice games and stuff.
Yeah. It's a whole different world when it comes to the online the online scene for StarCraft 2 as far as
right.
The competitiveness goes.
Right.
But yeah, like, I think that's again one of the things that kind of makes StarCraft unique, right? Because it's like while there are other RTSs where it's like like it's more fun to play with other people, it's interesting that we're still set in the fact that no, we want to play one-on-ones.
Right.
So, but yeah, and obviously, as StarCraft 2, has grown, we've seen it like kind of like we talked about earlier, it's kind of grown in itself, and they've kind of learned from that, developing co-op mode and kind of, I guess catering to the casual community. How do the other RTS like how did the AoE or Age of Mythology even like how do they cater to the non-competitive community?
So Bruce Shelley, who is the lead designer on the original Age of Empires, and then like continued to be on the design team for Age of Mythology and Age 3, he said in multiple interviews that like the reason that the series was so successful was that they tried to have different experiences. They had a lot of different experiences in the box. And so like they treated competitive and single player and like custom scenarios as like these different audiences with like unique kind of considerations and unique requirements. Mm-hmm. So like it was like when you open Age of Empires or open Age of Mythology or open Age of Empires 3, it like makes it very clear. We're like, okay, this is single player and like this is skirmish. And when you want to play a custom game with a computer, like here are all these cool knobs that you can change. And like, I think one of the things that StarCraft 2 does very differently is that it has this just like this one portal, you might say, where like multiplayer and then it's like ranked and it's it's a little bit different where like Age of Empires almost tried to stop you from going online unless you really wanted to, whereas StarCraft 2 is like always online, and then the ranked ladder is like right there kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, that was like it was like one was like discouraging and one was like, no, this is what you actually want.
Yeah, and like I think that like when Loco interviewed the guy who leads the co-op team or led the co-op team, I'm not sure what the current structure is. He talked about how like people would play the campaign and then not move on to the competitive multiplayer. And I always thought that was such an interesting way of phrasing it, because it's like this competitive multiplayer to me has always been like this small niche. Like there's so much more to the multiplayer than the competitive part. But like to him, he had been viewing it as this like binary, which now had this like new co-op vertical.
Right, exactly. How do you think AoE 4, as we know, is going to be coming out soon? How do you think that will kind of take the fight to RTS? Do you think it will give StarCraft 2 like a run for its money, or do you think this is kind of just like a cash grab?
Well, yeah. So I have kind of like I have two perspectives on the way that I think that could go. Like, I think one is it could go the direction of Dawn of War 3, where they just take a license that's well known and they take some mechanics that they feel sound popular, sound good on the back of the box, and then just kind of shove them into a game and they produce something that gets some sales, but ultimately isn't well liked. And like, I hope that they don't do that, but I think that that's a distinct possibility. I think that the other option, which I would be like super excited about, is that I think that they could go with something that's more like Age of Empires 2, which is much slower than StarCraft 2, but much broader. It's like has this massive technology tree and all these different things that you can do and build. And it's kind of like you could have this complementary system where like if you like StarCraft 2, but you find it to be a little bit too fast or a little bit too intense, it's like, oh, here's this game which like it has a competitive side, but like it's more casual, it's more slow, it's like a little bit more like more geared towards that. And then on the flip side, if you're an Age of Empires and you're like, well, I really want to play like an esport, like the most intense esport, it's like, okay, why don't you come play like StarCraft 2 or like Warcraft 4 or like whatever is coming next.
Right.
And I feel like the two, rather than competing, could like work together to like just complement each other. And so I hope that like I hope for that scenario. And like I hope for like the dream scenario would be Age of Empires 4 and then Warcraft 4 or like whatever the next big RTS game is. And then like there's StarCraft 2 as like this kind of like free to play, like, hey, come into the genre, it's free to play kind of thing. But I don't know if that'll turn out like that.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. I mean, some games do that when they get to the the end of the kind of the life cycle and they're just doing like the microtransactions. It's like, come on in, it's free. At this point, I mean, it already kind of is free with like with the starter edition. But just make the full thing free and then just run it off of the microtransactions. It's a possibility.
Yeah, like while StarCraft 2 is still like the big RTS, like I think they would struggle to do that for the ranked ladder because of Smurfs.
Yeah.
But if they come out with their go ahead.
No, I was saying I had a conversation with someone about this. We would have to be like your IP only gets like 3 accounts or something, like, or your I don't know how they would do that, your MAC address or what. I mean, it would have to be like a physical. It would almost have to be like the Chinese method, like where it's like linked to you. Where you can't just
I think Counter-Strike Global Offensive uses phone number. I think Dota 2 might use a phone number as well. In order to, it has like Counter-Strike has this thing called Prime Matchmaking, where if you register your phone number and level up your account enough, then you only get matched with other people who have done the same thing, which limits smurfing.
Right. No, that's it's interesting. It might be something that they need to do, with like the BattleNet thing, right, where they have like the 2-step authentication, where it's like, okay, you're forced to sign up for this, and that way they can like track your accounts, to prevent smurfing.
I would be curious about that. Like, I didn't mind giving Blizzard my phone number for 2-factor authentication because I feel like that's a very important security step. But I would actually be curious how many people would be uncomfortable giving Blizzard their phone number for that kind of system.
I don't know. It's like, how many people do you give your phone number to, right? Like, I mean, if you sign up for like the club card at the grocery store, right? And you sign up with your phone number, and then you wonder why you're getting all these random phone calls, like right after. It's like, well, it's because you signed up for that damn club card, dude. Like, it wasn't free. You sold them, you gave them your information, which they sold,
Right.
So it all kind of, it kind of comes back to you. But it's like it's like if you're willing to give them your phone number, but you're not willing to give Blizzard your phone number, right? It's like, well, I'd probably trust Blizzard more so because it's not like Dustin Browder is going to give me a phone call. That while very cool, I don't think that would happen.
Right.
But no, I think AoE 4 could have the potential to be really fun. Do you think they're going to focus on the esport portion of it and try to make it an esport and run that faction, or do you think it's going to be more for the nostalgia factor for those AoE fans and AoE 2 fans to kind of like bring them back into the game?
They haven't released that much information, and like you kind of have to judge them based on like some leaks that you've seen from some community members that they've invited to like look at the game, and like what they did with Dawn of War 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm always worried that like my opinion on something like this will just turn into like a Rorschach test of like how cynical I'm feeling at that particular moment. So I hope that they do a good job, but I honestly have no idea what direction they'll go with it.
Right. What do you think of like this new RTS? I don't know if you've heard much about this, but it's called Tooth and Tail.
Yeah, that looks really cool. Like, I think that's a really good example of how if you just like, even if your game doesn't have perfect mechanics or perfect technical design, if you just have a creative vision and you just focus on doing that, like you can produce something really cool and really interesting. Like I can't wait to play that game. I've been watching a lot of videos. I'm trying to finish another game first, and then I'm going to buy that.
That might be the next video series, right? Breaking that game down.
Oh, I hope so. I mean, it looks really cool.
Yeah, dude, definitely. Well, like you said, the videos are great. Keep them up. I mean, I know the community really appreciates them. And obviously, looking at the numbers, you get a fair amount of views for them as well. And I think people appreciate the time you've taken to, breaking it down, right? Like actually doing kind of like that step by step and doing it in those manageable chunks, right? Where like, I think the first one was like a half an hour, which was kind of long, but then you kind of realize like, okay, maybe they should be broken up, and then the next ones were like 15 minutes long instead. And that was like the perfect amount of time to like cover like the couple topics that you wanted to get across, like discuss it, and then get on to the next one.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. Like I've been trying to, like, every time I make a video, I try to make it a little bit better than the last one, and like still trying to do that with my next couple of series coming up. And so, yeah, I appreciate it. And like I said, the community has always been really good. So I don't have any complaints there.
Oh, good, man. Glad. Since you did just come in at the beginning of Legacy, so you didn't get to experience, all of the drama that, has happened in StarCraft 2, because there's been, it's had its fair share,
Gotcha.
of shit, but we've gotten over it now, and the community's not as toxic as it once was, which is great. It's great to see.
Gotcha.
Okay, man. Yeah, I think we covered quite a bit here. Now I know another thing I wanted to kind of talk to you about is, there's obviously like a lot of other RTSs out, right now, whether it be like Tooth and Tail, AoE 4 coming out. We talked a little bit about before the show, Halo Wars 2. Do you think the RTS genre in general, like, just needs to be redone? Because you had kind of also talked about like RTSs, like kind of getting like MOBA aspects like brought into them. And that kind of like the one that specifically comes to mind really is like Warcraft 3, because like while it is an RTS, you also have like your main champion, right, which is like more powerful, and it's like kind of MOBA-esque, right? Like it's not
right.
like it's not I don't know. I guess another example would be like Command and Conquer, right, which is the exact opposite, where you're like in the general seat, kind of like in StarCraft 2, right, and you're just controlling everything else. You don't have like this one overpowered, hero to control. But do you think it needs that, or do you think like StarCraft 2 is the way to go when it comes to like building RTS? Like, no, you really need to have like the top down, like you're in control of everything. You don't really need like a leader, per se.
Well, I feel like what RTS has been missing, and I think what it needs is like not necessarily any particular technical or mechanical direction. Like, I think it needs people with a vision who want to build something very specific for an audience. Like, a lot of times when I play independent RTS games, or I look at like Dawn of War 3 is a good example. Like, I feel like what the designer did was they played some game, and they were like me, like they had some criticism or praise of the design, and they're like, okay, let me build some version of this game I've played before, but with like all these fixes that I would add, and like let's throw in these mechanics that are like really popular in the community right now. And I feel like that's not a creative vision. That's just kind of like a reaction to another game.
Right.
And I think what the RTS genre needs is it needs people like the people who made Tooth and Tail, like people who have a vision for something they're trying to accomplish, and like work really hard on getting that. Like I think that StarCraft 2 established like a generic sustainable design direction for building an RTS game with like good pathing and like lots of quality of life features and stuff. But I think for an RTS to be successful, it's not so much about any particular feature like hero units or like 4X or anything like that. I think it's about the creator like giving a damn and like wanting to achieve something more than just like reacting to a game that came out previously. Like I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Instead of like trying to steal, little aspects that make one game good, it's like what do you want to do? Like what do you enjoy? What makes this game fun for you?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, that I'm really excited to see how the Vanguard prototype, like the actual game version of that, turns out, because like the impression that I get from the people who are from, I think it's Sunspear Games, I forget the exact name of the company,
yeah,
but I feel like
that's right, Sunspear.
I feel like they're actually trying to accomplish something. Like they have a vision for something they're trying to do that's more than just, oh, I think StarCraft 2 did some things wrong, so I'm going to make a game that doesn't do those things wrong. I think they have like some proactive thing that they're trying to do, and that gets me kind of excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, it's been great talking with you. Obviously, there's, so much we could really talk about, but I know we kind of I wanted to focus, basically on, the things that you've done for the community, and, that's the things that you've been focusing in on. But I would like to close it out. I would like to hear the story of your profile picture, because
sure,
your name's Brown Bear and you use that picture for everything, and that is not a brown bear. That is a green bear.
So originally, one of my favorite movies is a live action movie, Yogi Bear. And so I wanted to make, like, I just wanted to call my channel Yogi Bear. And then I realized that like it wouldn't have like there would be like some kind of trademark or whatever problem with that. So I renamed it to Brown Bear. And then I was like, oh, like in order to make this more professional, I kind of need like a profile picture. So I just went into Paint and I took my favorite color, which is green, and then I drew like a little bear, and then I drew in like little eye, and I was like, okay, this looks good. And then 3 years went by and it's still there.
It's very iconic at this point, right? Like everyone knows it. And it's like, yeah, that's like the brown bear.
Yeah, it worked out.
And it's not a brown bear; it's a green bear. So wait, your favorite movie is the live action Yogi Bear movie?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. It's a great movie.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
It's
wait, live action, or was it CGI?
It was like CGI.
Okay. I was gonna say, it wasn't like the Ninja Turtles movie with like Vanilla Ice, right? Where it had like the anthropomorphic turtles, like costumes or whatever. Okay. I'll have to give it a shot.
I think Yogi Bear is like, he's a good example of someone who's like, at least in that movie, he's a good example of someone who's like really profoundly incompetent at everything he tries to do. But like, because he means well and because he tries really hard, like things kind of still work out for him. And so I find that to be a nice parable, like a nice story. Like even if you're profoundly incompetent, you can still, through strong effort, make things work.
It's a success story that I strive for every day, my friend. Story, they might as well just call that Toast the Bear, because that's just my everyday. But no, it's interesting. It's interesting. I'll have to give the movie a shot. I can say that I've never seen it.
I enjoyed it. I don't think it's for everybody.
I'll have to give it a shot though if you enjoyed it. But yeah, man. Again, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to come on the show. Appreciate you for doing the videos, for the community. Really cool. I'm gonna obviously link those after the show for everyone to take a look at. If they haven't had the opportunity to watch them. Did you have anything that you wanted to bring up that I forgot, or that you wanted to touch on at all, or if you had anything for me?
No, nothing from my side. Thanks so much for having me.
Mhm.
Always happy to discuss anything related to StarCraft 2 or game design or anything like that. And yeah, again, I appreciate all the kind words and thanks for having me.
I guess we should go over one more thing before we let you go. Let's get some BlizzCon predictions.
Oh, this might be like a really long answer.
That's all right.
I don't know if if you saw that Dustin Browder was like the director of Heroes of the Storm, and then he left that team to work on an unannounced project.
Warcraft 4, right? Or this MOBA RTS MMO that they're building for phones.
Yeah, like I'm not really sure what they're working on, but the fact that it's him and then also David Kim left to work on an unannounced project, like those two guys, I feel like they would put them on something like an RTS, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like maybe this is just my experience in the corporate world, but I feel like people who are like directors like Dustin don't do a lateral transfer and be like, okay, I was a director and now I'm going to be this low level quality assurance engineer. Like he's going to go from being a director at one game to being a director on another game, right?
Right. Like if he wasn't happy with the company, he would leave the company.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
And so if the new game is hiring the director, then it must be like kind of early in development, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder if like their plan, and this is pure speculation, I have no inside information. I wonder if their plan is like, okay, they've started like actual development now that they have like Dustin and David Kim and presumably some other people. And maybe they have WCS 2017 and WCS 2018. And maybe they want to like start the beta after WCS 2018 and WCS 2019 will be for this new game. And so I feel like at BlizzCon, they won't necessarily announce it, but they will spend like a lot of next year getting everyone, like all the pro players, all the content creators, all on the same page of like, hey, this is the big new thing. You guys should make content and play this game. And then we'll see like a major announcement maybe next year.
That would be pretty awesome. I don't know. I don't know what to expect, right? From BlizzCon announcements. Like, I don't know. Like, honestly, like what I would like to see, and this is kind of a long shot, but I would like to see them, say like, okay, well, WCS Circuit went really well this year. The war chest, I think that should just be a yearly thing. Just introduce more skins each and every year, kind of like the compendium for Dota 2. Let us invest into our community, that way. And I would actually like them to try running StarCraft Remastered alongside StarCraft 2 WCS. So have remastered events right alongside StarCraft 2 at all the big WCS events. But I would also region lock it, obviously, since the Koreans, especially when it comes to like Brood War, are just like on Mars compared to Earth. It's not close. So that game definitely needs that. While I think the skill gaps are a little bit closer for StarCraft 2, for Brood War it's not even close. Like we need that would need to be region locked.
That would be really interesting. I would honestly love to just like, if I had any concept of what their business goal is with WCS, like whether they intend it for it to be like a genuine revenue driver, like we sold X number of copies of StarCraft 2 because of the WCS system, whether it's like, oh, we just really love competitive StarCraft and we want.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to imagine that they make some money off of it.
There is.
Oh, I think I lost you there.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. Okay. Sorry about that. I think we had a little hiccup.
No worries.
Okay, you were saying you weren't sure what their plans were with it. That's kind of where I lost you.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I'd like really love to know like whether they see WCS as like a genuine revenue driver for like sales today, or whether it's more like an investment for the future of like, oh, we've built out all these microtransactions and all this monetization, and our plan is we're going to see how that goes and then build a better version of it in the next game. Like, I'm not sure what exactly their intent is, and I would really love to know.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think they spend all this money and time like reinvesting in StarCraft 2, and even if the WCS circuit doesn't happen for remastered, I would love to see BlizzCon finals for Brood War, similar to like what they do for like ASL, but just have it on the big stage at BlizzCon. I think having Flash and Jaedong and all those people there for the remastered would be hype, and I'm sure there will be something this year. Now that they've introduced it and everything, I'm sure there will be some event this year, but I would love for that to be a yearly install as well.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Okay, last thing. Who do you think is going to win BlizzCon for StarCraft 2?
Probably innovation.
That was pretty quick. Like, you don't think anyone else has a chance?
Innovation is just playing really well right now, and also I think that the way that Terran is designed, Terran just gets stronger and stronger the better people get at the game, whereas the other races just don't scale as well. And so like
Tell that to Neeb.
Terran is this race that's like incredibly hard to play, but the skill ceiling is also so high that like when you have someone who plays Terran really well, it's just really hard to beat them. And so I feel like innovation has gotten to that point in the current meta where it's like he's just so good and he's playing this race where the potential is basically unlimited that I think he's just going to win no problem. But I mean, predictions go wrong all the time. What do I know?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously it'll depend. You know, we have a Super Tournament coming up here really quick, and it'll depend on who gets in. You know, we don't even know, the final exact lineup yet for BlizzCon. But you know what? I think if SOS manages to sneak his way into BlizzCon, and because right now he's like in 8th place, so if he gets there, I like his opportunity. I think he might win it all again.
Yeah, that would be cool to see, especially because I missed his first 2 BlizzCon like runs. It'd be cool to see him make another one.
Yeah, I think it's possible, and I have a theory about innovation that because he's won a lot of big tournaments, so he's made a lot of money. Like he won the big IEM, which was like $100,000. It was like a winner take all. I don't know if you knew about that one or not, but so SOS is doing pretty well. But I have this theory that when the bank count's running a little bit low, that's when he starts playing serious again. And then and then after he wins, he's just kind of like, I'm just playing for fun. Like I'm just hanging out with the team, like I'm chilling. And then he's like, count's getting a little bit low. I gotta practice for real now. It's time to win.
I wonder if he gets paid a salary for being on Jin Air.
Oh yeah, all the Jin Air players get salary, I would assume still, because they all still live in the house. So I would assume they still get paid a salary.
Wow.
It might not be as much as it